and I've had plenty of takeaways from everything that you've attended. I'd like to welcome now our keynote speaker for the day, Kieran Talbot. Kieran is Associate Director for AI and Ideas Adoption at the University of Manchester, so an obvious choice as our keynote, especially since he's from the ALM Fold as well. So we're looking forward to hearing his thoughts on how we can position the academic library in an age of AI and emerging technologies. So I'll hand over to you, Kieran. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Nikki. So, first of all, thank you for letting me talk here at the Academic Libraries North event in this lovely building. I sort of feel like I should be delivering a sermon, or maybe do a 45-minute drum solo, but I might lose some of you partway through. So, as said, I'm Kieran from the University of Manchester Library, and I recently was fortunate to start in this new role, which is AI and Ideas Adoption. But I think it's been quite helpful because it gives us a mandate and permission almost to start thinking about what this means for libraries. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about in this talk, about how we're thinking about it across teaching and learning, research and discovery, and social responsibility as well. So, let's click. I'll give a bit of context, some of the positioning. We'll talk about some of the things that we're doing at the University of Manchester Library already. Some of the areas I think probably we, collectively, can kind of lean into a bit more. Because it's Friday as well, I'll drop some propagation bombs too. So, and then I'll summary and Q&A. Great. Just briefly on the University of Manchester Library. So, the University of Manchester, we've got, I think it's about 45,000 students. I think there's about 10,000 members of staff. And then within the library, we've got about nearly 300 people. So, it's quite big. I think that has its advantages, but it also comes with challenges as well. We are across 9 sites across campus. So you can see the main library, the Alan Gilbert Learning Commons, which is our sort of our space with our books, but obviously a lot of learning and group work. And then we're really fortunate to have the John Rylands Research Institute and Library on Deansgate, which is in the centre of Manchester. And of course, millions of items and collections across these sites. So it's a cool place to work. Okay. First off, to set some context, I hit you with this. Now, when this event was organised, we probably didn't know that the 5th of July was going to be a day where some people are banging on about change and change coming and this kind of thing. So it was, I don't know if it's fortuitous or not, but I suppose why I wanted to pick on this initially is that to sort of step back and think about where we are in that kind of broader context. I got my first job actually at the University of Manchester in 2004. Thanks for asking, I eat a lot of fruit veg. But when I started, and I don't think it's just a sort of rose-tinted fault of 20 years, but the rate of change was not what it is at the moment. And I think the only constant that we can promise each other is that that pace is just going to continue. And Gen AI, and then whatever's coming next, will be more things that we have to deal with. So I think also because of HE, it's challenging at the moment, and we're not sure if these next lot are going to change things. They may do. We're also not long off the back of this crazy pandemic. We're still grappling with hybrid. I think, particularly at the University of Manchester, we had a big cyber attack a year ago, and that's had a really long tail. We've got a new president coming, I think started this week. So there's this tsunami of change, and then I'm quite aware that, us in our institutions are coming along and going, oh, by the way, there's this new technology that's going to change everything. So, why am I banging on about change? Not just to scare everybody, but I think it's because when we're navigating this, and I think people in this room are, that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that we are centering the human in all of our conversation, our discussion, and hopefully, I think that's coming through with the sort of workshops and breakouts that we're running today and the previous day. Making sure that it's not being done to people, but with them, and whether that is our colleagues, researchers, students. And I think that's super important, always to centre the human in what we're doing. And then the second one is on looking at where we've got agency. So I don't think we are in a position to say, let's disengage with AI and ignore it. I'm not suggesting we go to the looms with our hammers and destroy it. We could, but probably wouldn't get very far. But then at the other end of the scale, we're probably not going to be designing frontier models. I read a thing saying Princeton University, so they're not short of World War II, purchased, I think, 300 of these GPUs that you need to build a supercomputer to train like a brand new model. But Meta have been able to buy 350,000 of these things to build a mega supercomputer. So even one of the richest unis in the world, I think it's 0.08% of the processing power that Facebook are going to be able to deliver. So we need to look at where we can operate and where we can influence. I think the library is a sort of really key position to do that, because we're kind of small enough within our institution to be able to pivot a little bit quicker than the rest of it, but the rest of the university really takes on board what we say. We're able to influence. So I think the library is a great place to exist where we are now in this particular kind of change moment. Okay. Oh yeah, so I didn't want to Gen AI everything, so this is Kieran GPT. I was just trying to, in a sort of conceptual, diagrammatic way, picture perhaps where I think we are, and I think Gen AI kind of exploded, boom, onto the scene in late 2022, and we're kind of trying to work out what the heck it means for libraries and universities. There we go. And I think we're starting to move out of that space. So many of you here are talking about the pilots that you're running, the skills that you're looking to develop as library professionals or students or researchers. And we're slowly, mad skills, starting, I think, to move towards embedding it. And I do think, I think it's quite hard to come up with a definitive strategy for AI, because I don't think you can have necessarily an AI strategy, there you go. You need to work out how you're going to weave it into the rest of what you're doing. Which I think is what we're starting to see. And if you want a decent kind of framework and approach, I know Andrew Cox from Sheffield has come up with a lot of content, and JISC as well. They've got some good kind of maturity models that you can look at, and or get your pens out as well. So, positioning the library. Okay, now we are well positioned. We're often sort of like the heart of the university, I feel. I think libraries are amazing. We're a sort of interdisciplinary space, often kind of leading on the sort of pedagogical sort of emerging methods. And I think that's why we're so well positioned to kind of take a lead on some of this stuff. So I'm going to talk about some of the spaces that I think we're in already, but where we could go further. So, position the library as a centre for interdisciplinary digital collections research. Now, as an academic library, I think many of us are fortunate to have collections and special collections. We're fortunate to have some. And I've sort of tried to imagine the situation as it is at the moment. If you have some researchers who want to do some particular stuff with your collections. And I think there's a sort of magical space where things happen. But in order to get into that space, you need people working together. You might need money to fund people to develop software that's going to pull data out of your kind of various silos of data, and this could be sort of images or transcriptions or metadata. And I think, I'm convinced, we can kind of lower the barrier to that space and open up collections to more people to do more interesting stuff. There's sort of the concept of kind of collections of data, and I think AI and machine learning is sort of core to that. Okay, so you might be thinking, okay, what's he going on about collections, siloed collections? Okay, so this is your friend of mine, Mary Hamilton. She was a sort of 17th, 18th century, 19th century aristocrat. She went to a lot of banging parties in the 1780s. But we're really fortunate to have an archive of her correspondence, her diaries, her letters, and they're actually really interesting. But they are split across many of these kind of siloed platforms. So you have a sort of archive record somewhere. Somewhere else you've got some metadata, descriptions of what we've got. You've got some actual kind of, I think these might be IIIF. So you've got actual images, again, in another platform, another system. And then you've also got the output of research that has already taken place on that particular collection, that archive. But they're all distributed across all of these platforms and systems, and that's not really a great position to be able to encourage kind of further research upon that, because it takes a lot of wrangling to be able to get that in a shape. It means you can do sort of interesting things. So what I would like to get on a path to is being able to pull these data sets together into some kind of library data layer. Now, I don't know what that looks like yet. And it could be that we could be using a technology like AWS or Azure or one of those platforms, or it could be something more kind of library specific. And I think we could do something around transforming the metadata into something that's kind of consistent that you could then apply kind of machine learning at scale. So it could be that you don't just want to research Mary Hamilton, you want to research all of our kind of correspondence of people from the past sort of 400 or 500 years. And I think this would be a good kind of road to get on. I feel that we need a data strategy, a library data strategy, which is something I'm quite interested in. Interested if anyone else has got any ideas around that. And then I also think that we can pull into this space more support, more guidance, and ideally, kind of out the box, ready to go, machine learning AI tools that could operate across your collection. So rather than having to build bespoke tools for a particular bespoke piece of research, if we could have something that was already there, ready to go, I think people could engage with it and probably get more ideas about how they could then perhaps take that software, if it's open source, and then customize it to their kind of teaching or learning need. So we're fortunate to have the John Rylands Research Institute Library, and that's kind of the collaborative space between library, academia and researchers. So we're having conversations around this. And I'm hoping that we might even be able to engage with a third party who will perhaps help us kind of do a very small proof of concept where we will pull some data from some different silos together and basically kind of see what we can do with it. Hopefully we can get maybe a tame researcher or two to actually kind of do something interesting. Yes, again, I'd be very interested if anyone's got any kind of ideas around that. In terms of AI tools, okay, so this is we've got a really lovely kind of Dante's collection, and this is a page from Dante's Inferno, and we're Academic Libraries North. I'm not against stealing from Academic Libraries South, so this is actually a tool written by people in Oxford University's Visual Geometry group. You might have seen their website. They've got a lot of really kind of powerful tools that can operate at scale, categorize, recognise parts of images. And so we've done a bit of work with Giles, who's mentioned there, to train a particular model on our content, our Dante's content. And it's able to pull out the images, the sort of side notes, poems, and it just shows you, I suppose, what's possible. And if you're a researcher interested in perhaps just the imagery from a particular sort of corpora of books or whatever it is that we've got digitised, you can kind of do in seconds what would take, you know, days, weeks, months by hand. And so I think it would be great if we had this kind of ready to go for people to kind of use and engage with. Yeah. Okay. Right. So we've gone through, PowerPoint 16. The other area I think we could potentially lean into, which might be quite interesting, is looking at that research output. So the research has occurred at our universities that we're part of. And we're often kind of custodians, or we've got some kind of responsibility for that process, whether it's having theses going into a repository or supporting the publishing process. Libraries are quite key to that in many instances. And so something that we've been thinking about at Manchester, and particularly with the Office for Open Research, which we've been sort of developing over the past few years, is this idea that we can, in the same way we have kind of a modern collection and special collections, start to think about our research collection. And this challenge very much with open science and open research. And I think because we own that process, we've got the opportunity to almost like shape and future-proof it. So if we can capture not just the article, whatever it is, the piece of research output, but we can make sure that the links to the data that research was based on, perhaps the tools, the software that go along with it, and any other kind of supporting information around that research. If we can capture it in some instances, or at least the metadata around it, we think we can start to curate this kind of research collection. And I think that's relevant to sort of the AI space and machine learning, because if we're creating some really quality metadata around this new collection, again, that sort of opens doors for sort of that operation at scale across that collection. And we think that we could possibly help the wider institution learn about itself. So if we're saying, oh yes, the University of Manchester is concentrating on sustainable energy, or helping solve sort of issues around cancer, if we can track from this that we are not publishing in those different areas, then I think the library is going to be able to show value in the sense that we can say, hey, look, we're shouting about this area, but actually we either need to stop shouting about it or do more in that space. And so this is something worth thinking about. And so my colleagues in the Office for Open Research as well have been kind of forging ahead with a sort of more agile way of working. And that they're coming up with kind of wireframes for some of potential applications that could support this through sprints where they are using GenAI co-pilots to actually code up some kind of proof of concepts, which is it's a new way of working because no one in that team is a software developer. They're not coders, but they're developing these proof of concepts, and then they are coming to the developers in my team, instead of with a kind of list of wants or requirements, they're going, well, I've got this demo I can show you, and it's opening up it's quite an interesting kind of dynamic in conversation, and quite interesting to be involved with, because because it is. Okay, so, right. Okay, so this is Google, who are going to take away all the hard work of searching. We're seeing GenAI layered on and added to a lot of our searches. So in America, they are testing this sort of publicly, so I think you will see this on top of your Google search results. You'll get a GenAI summary I think it's the same Gen AI summary that's told people to whack glue into their pizzas and add petrol into their spag bol. So it's not without problems. But I think us, as people working in a library, we're seeing this in the scholarly search tools that we are either already working with or potentially going to be getting from the vendors that we're working with. You're also seeing some of the kind of LLM Gen AI stuff leading into the academic kind of, we've got elicit, cite, perplexity. We're sort of leaning on we're backed up by good data sort of credentials. But I think it's something that we need to think about in the sense that we are going to start getting students, certainly this September or next, who are going to be used to this way of searching and possibly trusting whatever has been, generated in a way that we perhaps are not used to. So obviously that's something we need to think about in this sort of academic, in the teaching and learning, and also in discovery of content. Because it really disrupts how I think we have viewed data and information, wisdom and knowledge. Everything sort of made sense up until now. Articles, books, publishing, peer review. These are processes that are quite understandable. And now this new thing, Gen AI, has come along and sort of hoovers up all of that and then spits a load of stuff at you. You're not really sure how it's done it. And I think that's a really new kind of paradigm, and I think it could be tricky to get our heads around. So I think that's why it is quite important we have events like this, where we are thinking about, okay, what skills do we need to navigate this? What skills do our students need, our colleagues need? So yeah, I think it certainly disrupts the information retrieval sort of area. And because of that, certainly at Manchester, and I know from the session today, we're thinking about what that means for the students, the people that we are working with. And so colleagues in our teaching, learning and students team are starting to develop resources that just help facilitate that conversation and work out when you are delegating a particular task to an AI tool, whether that's sort of search or kind of a lit review. What actually are you giving up? What is that agency that you are giving to this machine? That have you really thought through where it's gathering its information, what the inbuilt kind of biases are, and so we're we are pushing these resources out across our kind of existing learning platforms. So, and I think coming back to sort of the information retrieval piece, it's probably a good kind of inflection point, a good time for us to think about what it sort of means for searching. So colleagues in the room are looking at sort of reconceptualising what search means, rethinking, researching, research, and sort of coming up with this idea around the philosophy of search. So I think, again, if anybody else is thinking along those similar lines, so I know there's some people from MMU here, and Monica of Weston is also thinking about the future of scholarly research, and I think it's it could be a good topic to have some conversations around. Okay. So. Right, yeah, so lifting the black box. I think with all forms of AI, Gen AI, and the LLMs especially, there's a lot of sort of anthropomorphicization that goes on, and certainly I always say please and thank you, and then you think, should I be saying please and thank you for these things? And I think some of that sort of the magical black box stuff is probably not helpful to sort of when you frame it, because at the end of the day it is basically just a big probability engine. It's predictive text on steroids. So I think being able to kind of demonstrate that a little bit is quite helpful, just to help demystify that. So I've got a colleague called Pete, who's an amazing software developer, how he's not working for Google. Don't give me any ideas. For our recent library conference, he pulled together a demo. And this demo is based on the sort of scenario that you've got hundreds of thousands of images that are uncategorized on a big disk, needs sorting out. And so he pulled together this demo, which is built on the TensorFlow model. And here he's just showing you that you've got different collections, Bible illustrations, and you can see the images at the bottom. And what he has done is he pulled out a few beforehand and manually labelled them. So said, that image is a Japanese map. That one is a photo of some women in the Second World War. So there is a training set of data. And this particular model has got a bunch of parameters, and you set these parameters. And these build up kind of the different layers of this particular model that you are pumping these images through. And he's just, showing you that you can choose different collections. So we ran this at our annual conference, and Pete had actually done a kind of preamble building up to this, so I realised I've just kind of thrown this at you. But he'd done quite a good explainer, and it was, as one of the events of the day, it was one with possibly the best feedback, because everybody who went to it really felt that they had they'd taken it apart, so that you actually get to write some Python code when you're actually in the workshop. And it really showed what's going on kind of under the hood of these particular things. So yeah, he's kind of training the model there. And he was able to explain differences between accuracy and training, and issues like when you do train a model. So if you're training a model to recognise Japanese maps versus photos of women in wartime, you can actually train the model and it'll be too accurate, and it will give you 100% accuracy on the stuff you trained it on. But if you give it a fresh image, this is a Japanese map, it won't recognise it because it's never been trained on it. So he was able to explain concepts like building in noise to the images, because you want to be able to throw any image at this kind of thing. So it was and then obviously talking about probability, it gives you a probability for which collection that particular image should drop into. So it was very effective. We're very fortunate to have a developer, but I think potentially you could create an equivalent without too much effort. So. Still going, but yeah. We're slightly stepping back, big picture. What can we do with AI, machine learning? How can we position the library? So this is an artist's impression of the Innovation District, Manchester, ID Manchester. Probably going to be a few years before it looks like that. But there's certainly a trend in these innovation districts. So we have ID Manchester in Manchester. I know here in Leeds we've got the Leeds Innovation Arc. Newcastle, we've got Newcastle Helix. So I think as academic libraries north, let's not be shy about seeing if we can get involved with these kind of developments. So this one, ID Manchester, is a partnership between the university, its local communities, and it's local businesses as well. And the idea is it's going to be the place where people, researchers within the university, are going to spin out their ideas. They're going to try and commercialise, and certainly sort of reading around it, it's all about trying to reduce the inequities between the local communities. Certainly in Manchester, there's a lot of communities with challenges who are sort of on our doorstep, and in some ways it's a travesty that we've got kind of leading thinkers solving the world, but down the road there's some real problems. So I think it's trying to bring that together and enhance and encourage that knowledge exchange between institution and kind of local area. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this in this context is because as a university library, we support many other user groups. We've got students, postgrads, we've got our staff, we've got our colleagues, the public in many instances. And so for me, it makes sense that, well, why wouldn't we be involved in this? Why wouldn't we be helping our students and our researchers who've got an idea to spin out and come up with a business idea and that kind of thing? So I think it's something we're certainly starting to think about, and we're starting to talk with the planners of this particular project. And I think it fits with, going back to that original change slide, the sort of direction of travel. So I took the bet on the election, not in a way that would get me fired or win me any money, but I had a quick look at the Labour stuff. And one of their something they kind of pledged to do is to try and encourage and drive that knowledge exchange between institution and place. I know certainly where we are, there's a big kind of emphasis on our civic responsibility, us as an anchored institution. And so if they're going to start to look at how well we spin companies out and what the support is to support them, well, the library, that's what we do. We're great at supporting. We provide lots of amazing services. So I just think there's an opportunity there. And because these spin-outs and stuff, it's often about AI, it's about fintech, medtech, it's all that kind of leading technology, emerging technology. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity for us there as a library. Okay, so the other thing. Okay. So what AI is going to do is going to speed up the development of this stuff. This robot I met, I think, at Sheffield Hallam Uni in 2018. It can wave at you, but it's probably not going to be fetching a book from a shelf. But this is a Boston Dynamics dog, which I met at the University of Salford, I think earlier this year. This one probably could get your book for you. You might be able to digitize it as well, and probably bring it to your office. So, I'm not saying we'll be speaking about this next year, but I think we need to be thinking about what this means for libraries and what this means for, just the same way we are with AI, we start to think about what this means for jobs in the coming years. We need to be thinking about what happens when these things are in the stacks. And I try and notice these changes, sort of the cultural shifts, like the first time you might get in an Uber, or you see a Deliveroo bicycle on campus. And so my mum said, your nan likes her new cat. And I was like, okay, what? I didn't understand because my nan is pretty infirm, she's in a bed, she's in no position to be looking after a cat. So I said, Mum, what do you mean a cat? And so this appeared on the family WhatsApp group. So this this is a library conference, so I've got to get a camera reference. So I felt like my mum and dad sort of like the canaries in the coal mine. Like if they think it's acceptable to give my nan a robot cat, which apparently she finds kind of comforting, she's not in the best place, she's sort of she's very old. But if they think that's fine, then I think that's an indicator of a sort of shift in how we feel about some of our robot friends. Unlocker of archives. So I think we've got a decades-long backlog of archives, all this undigitized, uncatalogued stuff. And I think with AI, we could certainly accelerate this. We've already, so some colleagues from my team have sat down with an archivist. I said, show us your process, what do you do at the moment? And it's very convoluted, it's Excel, it's MarcEdit, it's all these tools. They use a bit of Gen AI, and it was a bit of a jaw-drop moment in that a weeks-long process looks like it would take now half a day, and that means the archivist can actually do a lot of the more interesting stuff, like researching and that kind of thing. And I also think with some of those tools might enable kind of much quicker. Now, it's difficult because cataloguers obviously love metadata, and we have a very high quality bar. You could have possibly like quick and dirty cataloguing. You can just photo the front page of a book. At least you can get it discoverable, and then later on you can come back and sort of catalogue it properly. So I think there's a lot of potential about kind of opening the doors of our archives. Okay, simplification, sure. So, GenAI is rubbish, he says. Yeah, okay, here's my caveat. Today, so we're going to start seeing, and I think we're seeing it already, so the LLMs, they're not just going to be able to, give me a nice weekend away idea, go to York, here's a walking tour, here's a restaurant you might want to go to. It's going to be able to book the restaurant, book the walking tour, and I think it's going to be interesting for libraries, not just because we might want to have things that have got agency, but what if someone else's bot is phoning our customer service colleagues to ask a question that they might not even know they're talking to a bot. So I think there's some really kind of interesting stuff going on there. Probably we're going to see the hallucinations reduce as that kind of technology kind of improves. Hopefully we'll see some of the issues around it, the environmental stuff, improve over time. We'll see. Okay. Oh yeah. That's sort of where we are, I feel, in terms of we've literally just nudged the door open. This is, where the World Wide Web was in 92, 93. This Gen AI stuff, we're just at the beginning. And I think, it can be useful to remember that. We're at the start. There's a lot more interesting, exciting, challenging times ahead. Second cat. Yeah, this one is, I know AI is shiny, and I know, it's my job to talk about it, but I don't think it's always the answer. I think there's a really long tail of stuff that we can do. Certainly, we're still, kind of robotic process automation, and I think often there's some just basic kind of skills. Sitting down with someone and going through what they do in Excel, you can actually find a lot of kind of improvements that do not have to be AI powered. So I think there's a long tail. Okay. He says about to hopefully digitally transform our library. But what I mean to say is, I think the rapidity of change and the amount of change that is going on to sort of create a big front-loaded program, I'm not sure that it quite works anymore. So what we've started to try to do at the University of Manchester Library certainly is start to look at some of the more kind of agile approaches. So, we've had a look at agile and Scrum and this kind of stuff, and not just for software development, but actually delivering other objectives as well. So I think, I still think we can try and do big change, but I think we have to be much more kind of iterative and sort of accepting that things are going to be challenging and you might have to pivot as you go. So, what have we got? Okay, so history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. Merciful God instructed our contemporaries in a new art. Thanks to topography, 3 men working in 3 months have printed 300 copies of a folio, a feat they could not have accomplished in their entire lives. They've been written with a pen and stylus. So, the literary and knowledge and library world has been rocked many times before, and it's going to be rocked again. I mean, so we've got Gen AI is pumping out so much information. I think that, depending on where you read, or the predictions say that the World Wide Web will be kind of 90% generated at some point. And potentially these LLMs are going to sort of eat their own tail because they're going to be training on stuff that they've spewed out. And another one, this is another quote, this is from Filippo Di Strata. So they shamelessly print at negligible price material which may, alas, inflame impressionable youths. They print the stuff at such a low price that anyone and everyone procures it for himself in abundance. The printers guzzle wine, and swamped in excess, bray and scoff. The Italian writer lives like a beast in a storm. So, I mean, you could swap out some of the words there, and it might be that you've got an OpenAI or a Meta shamelessly printing out everything, and then you've got the poor creative or the journalist or the filmmaker who's now sadly living in a stall. So, yeah, but of course, Gen AI could just be a passing fad like the internet was. Yeah. Daily Mail accurately got this right in 2000. No, okay, so. Okay, yeah, so David Columbia. So this is sort of a counterpoint to some of the stuff that I've been saying about Gen AI and tech, and the emerging tech being seismic paradigm changes. He's coming from the other angle, so sort of, unless evidence to the contrary presents itself, we must assume that technological shifts are best seen as changes in degree and not in kind, that human beings remain what they are, and that human societies too remain largely bound by much the same fundamental forces by which they have always been characterised. So, I suppose from that, I'm kind of taking people be people, and we're still the same meat socks trying to get through life as best we can. So, in summary, so I think kind of my sort of takeaway points are around the human centricity, which I think is shining through today here with all the workshops and the discussions that are going on. I think that's what people who work in libraries are great at. We do always try and think about the people and not just the technology. I do think there's something in having a library data strategy, and I would be interested in talking to anyone around that. I think that agility is going to be a way forward, especially as more technology appears. There'll be someone else in a few years talking about what quantum computing means for libraries. But I think also leveraging our position in the institution. Again, we are small enough to adapt and be agile, but big enough to have that influence across the wider university. And this is a bit cheesy, but I did saw this on the way to work today. I thought, that's kind of relevant-ish. But yeah, the people in this room, that's why we're here. You're kind of the leaders, the champions in your libraries, leading on this change. So I think with that, thank you.